Okay, so let's try this again. Hi, my name is Angus MacDonald, and I'm starting a YouTube channel. The channel is basically gonna consist of discussions I'd like to have on different aspects of our life. Philosophy, politics, religion, you name it. I'll try to get into it at some point. First, I need to make it known, because I mentioned that I will talk religion. I'm an atheist. I'm not a heathen. I'm not wicked. Those are real common misconceptions of what atheists are. I simply stated I have a lack of belief in deities. I don't believe in intelligent design. I believe in science and reason. I'm also a humanist. And while there are atheists who are humanists and humanists who are atheists, one does not necessarily preclude the other. And my best suggestion, rather than me try to explain to you at this point in time, because this is an introduction video, what a humanist is, or what humanism is, or precisely what atheism is, and what an atheist is, I might suggest that if you're not already familiar with those definitions, that you take a quick browse on the internet. There's a ton of information. But you need to know that, because it has an effect on my perspective. And of course, if we start talking religion and you don't know that I'm an atheist, then problems can come to pass. But please don't discount me just because I'm an atheist. If you are of religious or of a religious background, that's fine. Some of the most intellectual conversations I've had in my life are with people of religion. Contrary to popular belief, I don't think people that believe in God are crazy. There are other atheists who believe that if you believe in an imaginary friend, that you have psychosis. I don't buy that. But we'll get into that another time. Really what I wanted to do today is explain to you who I am, how I became an atheist, why I became an atheist, and then go from there. So the first thing you need to know is I have a genetic disorder. It's called ectodermal dysplasia. It's not a disease, can't catch it. You have to be born with it. I was born in 1960 with the disorder. Not much was known. I wasn't supposed to live, but here I am. I'm 55 years old, and here I am. So what drove me, I guess would be the best way to put it, to atheism? It really does go back to the very beginning. So I'm born with a genetic disorder, and for the first 4 years of my life, 5 years of my life, you know, I don't have much memory of that, but I'm really not associating with people, peer groups, and really have not started forming any types of memories. But then I start kindergarten, and from kindergarten to grade 6, I start to feel the pressure of discrimination. Interestingly enough, that pressure doesn't come from the other kids that I'm hanging around with, from my peer group. The discrimination comes from the adults, from the parents, the mothers and the fathers of the kids I'm with. Kids are kids. You know, kids are going to play with one another, or they're not. just that simple. They have no concept. They're in learning stages. We teach discrimination to people. As individuals, we teach our kids discrimination. But with that being said, life was pretty good. I had problems because of my disorder. I couldn't be involved in a lot of things. I'll get more into that on another video when I talk about my disorder a little bit more. But as a result of what was going on at that time in my life, I was a believer of God. I was raised a Christian. My father, I believe, was Presbyterian. I know I attended a Presbyterian church, Sunday school. My mother, I believe, is Catholic. And so I went to church. I prayed. And in my preteen years, about 10 years old, I became involved with a Christian group at a church called the Christian Center in Toronto. And attended the church for, I don't know, about a year. I was also a member of Army Cadets at about the same time. And about a year into going to this Christian Center, there was one of these revivalist things coming to town. I don't know exactly what you call them. People go down on stage, they get their hands laid upon them, they're healed. And so I was coaxed by my peers in the church to attend this meeting. It was at a big arena, lots of people. And that if I prayed and wished hard enough, wished is the key word here, that maybe God would find favor and heal me of my disorder. That's not what happened. We went to the seminar. When it came time to go down onto the stage, I proceeded down onto the stage, and I was turned away. When I asked why I was turned away, I was asked, were you interviewed while you were in the lineup? And I said no, and they said, well, then you're not allowed to be down here. I went back to my seat somewhat distressed. Excuse me. And eventually we went home. And when I tried to question the minister of the church and other church members as to why something like that would happen, why God would turn me away, I got the standard responses. Oh, well, it must be part of God's plan. God must have a purpose for you. But that didn't sit well with me. And so suddenly I found myself at a point where I needed to question everything. I needed to know why. And I wasn't getting the answers from the church. I wasn't getting the answers from the Bible. And so I turned to, at that time there's very little known about DNA, or at least very little known to the general public of DNA and what you could get from libraries. But I could find out information about how conception and gastrulation work, and that was a good starting point. So I won't get into all the details of how the disorder transpires. That's for another discussion. But the basics of it are, after conception, you have 3 germ layers: the endoderm, the mesoderm, and the ectoderm. And these 3 germ layers are the 3 layers that will make up the structure of the human body. But I also learned that a defect can occur in any one of these germ layers, and when a defect occurs, the DNA sequencing can initiate a mutation, mutate around the defect, or abort. And of course we all know what happens then. And so now I had a better understanding of how I ended up with the disorder that I had. But it still didn't really answer the questions I needed to have answered. So I began to research biology a little more, so that I could have a better understanding of how the whole biological process works. And of course, in doing this, I read Origin of Species. I read some other material. I don't remember it all at this point, but I began to get a better understanding of how DNA works, and how cell division works, and how structures develop, and what can occur. And of course, this set me on a path of wanting to know more science, specifically. And, well, the questions of how I ended up with the disorder weren't specifically answering my main question, which, of course, was why would God turn me aside? The other science that I started to pack on top of that began to show me a picture that was inconsistent with what I had been taught in church. And so, but by the time I really start to get a grasp and understand what I'm seeing, I'm at a point in school where I'm really being discriminated, and I just can't take school anymore. So at the age of 15, I leave school, but I didn't stop learning. I kept my nose in the books. Libraries were numerous throughout Toronto. I could get books whenever I wanted. I took a job as a driver. It was something I could do, and again, that will be explained in another video. And because I was a driver, that gave me time to stop at a library, take a book out. I could read the book when I was sitting doing nothing, having a coffee. And more and more I saw a structure, both from physics and from biology and from ecology, that really was inconsistent with what I was being taught in church. And I finally stopped going to church. And it would be a few more years before I would finally turn around and say, you know what, I just, I can't believe that if there is a God, that this God would do anything. And at that point, I really had turned from being a Christian to being agnostic. I was just before my 20s. I had, I still wasn't, I was on the fence. I still wasn't entirely convinced there was no God, but I was becoming more and more accepting of the idea that God, if he did exist, played a much smaller role than what we were being taught in the church. A lot of science was coming out. A lot of science was coming out, still is coming out. A lot of science was coming out in the late 70s and early 80s. And as I moved into my 20s, I began to learn more on how the universe was formed, the Big Bang Theory. And I can't say precisely when, but it just one day clicked that there couldn't possibly be a God, there couldn't possibly be a creator behind all of this. I mean, here we are. At that time, we were about 4 billion people on our planet. Here we are, 4 billion people on this small little rock in a solar system, 9-planet at that time. Put Pluto back. Nine Planet at that time, and and we were circling around the sun, a star, and that our star was part of a grander galaxy, and that our galaxy was part of a grander universe. And it was really, I guess, at that point that I came to this just epiphany that, sort of jumped out at me, that, how would a God create such a vast universe with all these other galaxies and all these other solar systems, and we're somehow the only species within this vastness that was created. And suddenly it clicked. There just couldn't possibly be a God that could have created any of this. And so, I looked at what my options were, and I was no longer on the fence. I was an atheist. But that created a whole new set of problems, because you just didn't want to tell people that you were an atheist, especially not back in the 80s. The minute you told people that you were an atheist, you were a heathen. You were a Satan worshiper. If you didn't believe in God, there must be something wrong with you. And so I kind of kept quiet about it for the longest time. I made it known to a few people that I didn't believe in God. And of course, every time I did, that shrunk my circle of friends a little bit more. Surprisingly enough, it was one of the first things I told my wife when we first met back in 1984. I told her, straight out that I don't think it. I'm trying to remember exactly when I told her that I was an atheist. I think when we first met, I told her that I didn't really believe in a God, and then when I asked her to marry me and she said yes, she wanted to have a church wedding, and we had a discussion about the idea that I wouldn't make it known to the minister of the church that I was an atheist. I would go along with the process, simply because it was in the best interest of both families. Her family, I really didn't know what their perspective on religion was. I knew what my family's perspective on religion was. And of course, for me, being married in a church would be a very difficult task, but it would be something that I would go ahead and do anyways, just for the sake of keeping everybody happy. And so there it is. And really then from 1985 on, I continued to learn. I continued to study. I'm not a physicist, I'm not a biologist, but I do have a relatively strong understanding of these processes. And as of today, I am thoroughly convinced that there is no deities involved. Even if we find out what's outside of our universe, I don't believe that we're going to be able to conclude that there was any intelligent design behind any of it. But now we're getting into talking about multiverses and parallel dimensions, and that's just not part of what today's introductory is all about. So with that said, that's why I'm an atheist. A confluence of events over a period of time in my life took me from being a strong Christian with a strong belief in God to a strong lack of belief in deities. and with all that said, you know, please understand that as I move forward with other videos, and other discussions on a variety of topics, I'm open and willing to talk about anything. And if there is stuff I don't know, and there's a lot I don't know, I don't profess to be an expert at anything. I have slightly better than average IQ, but that doesn't make me overly smart by any sense of the imagination. One of the things I would like to ask, though, is that if we're going to have conversations, let's keep it rational. We don't need to be name calling. We don't need to be finger pointing. That gets us nowhere. The best approach to how we can solve the problems that face us moving forward in society, in a global society, is to be pragmatic, to be rational. Nothing gets solved. I mean, really, nothing gets solved through violence. We know that. It's just simple common sense. But if we can talk things out, for certain we can find common ground. We're not going to agree on everything. You're not going to change my perspective on everything. You may change my perspective on some things. I may change your perspective on some things. We're all going to bring something different to the table when we talk. But let's talk, because unless we communicate more and in a more pragmatic, rational way, we're simply not headed in the right direction. With that being said, again, my name is Angus MacDonald. I hope you like my videos. This is my first one. I'm rather shy. Being in front of this camera has made me, is making me a little bit nervous. As time goes on, I'll get a little bit more camera friendly and try to look at you more. I won't be in your face though. I don't want to be that person. I'm really tired of some of the videos that I'm watching online and how these people are really in your face and it's their way or the highway. That's not the way it is with me. As a believer in science and reason, I believe that there is no firm conclusions to anything. There's always new information. There's always something we don't know. And when added to what we do know, it changes the perspective. And so hopefully this can be a learning experience for everybody. And maybe you won't like me at all, and my video channel goes nowhere. Time will tell. Like me if you want, or not. Thanks.